Welcome, everyone. Today, I'm going to start the podcast a little bit differently by introducing myself first because we have a lot of awesome news to share with you. My name is Ryan. I'm the CEO and founder of UpKeep, and today I've got some super exciting changes and new projects that we've been working on over here at UpKeep. When we first started this podcast, our goal was to shine a spotlight on those with new and innovative ideas within the maintenance and reliability space. And from our very first season to the launch of our fourth season of the podcast, that goal has never changed. It's only gotten bigger. We want to continue learning from our community and the industry's masterminds, trailblazers, and pioneers. So to reflect on this goal of our podcast, we actually decided to change our name. Are you ready? Caitlyn's nodding her head yes. I haven't even introduced Caitlyn yet, but she's here with me. I'm super excited and thrilled to announce that we are rebranding our podcast to the Maintenance Mavericks. That's not the only news that we have to share and that I have to share. I'm also really excited to share that UpKeep is launching also a brand new podcast series called The Woman in Maintenance, hosted by our very own Chief of Staff, Caitlyn Young, who's here with me today, that I get the awesome privilege of interviewing with me and us on this podcast. Caitlyn was the founder of the maintenance community Slack group. And we've actually have Caitlyn here as our guest today to share some more about the newest projects that we're working on. Basically see a little bit more about like this diversity and inclusion within the maintenance and reliability space. So welcome to the podcast, Caitlyn. Super excited to have you.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm so excited to be here, celebrate all the big new projects we have coming on, and just talk a little bit more about diversity, inclusion, and the future of our industries.
No small topic by any means.
No.
The future of our industry. Before we jump in about this like big grand vision of talking about our future, Caitlyn, can you share a little bit more about yourself, your background, and how you were first introduced into the field of maintenance and reliability to our listeners? I think I know the answer.
Yes. So, I'm very lucky to have had UpKeep introduce me to the maintenance reliability industry, actually. So my background is in nonprofit management and social impact and trying to do as much good in the world as I can. And when I was looking for a new startup to become involved with, I found UpKeep and really became passionate about our mission to help the underserved maintenance and reliability workspace. So that was my first introduction. And the more I learned and the more I became involved, the more passionate I became about this industry. I was super fortunate to be pushed by Ryan to take and sit for the CMRP exam. And that was definitely a crash course learning experience. So I was super lucky to pass the exam, but it took a lot of really serious studying, talking to as many individuals as I can, and just learning as fast as I can. So super grateful for that experience. And that is how I first started becoming involved in maintenance and reliability.
It's been almost 4 years now.
Almost 4 years, that's right.
Almost 4 years and still going strong. And, over the last 4 years, not only have you learned a ton about the industry, but you've made a lasting impact on the entire industry with the maintenance community, all of the things that you've done for us here at UpKeep. So really applaud you for everything that you have done and that you will do for the industry in the future. The main thing that I wanted to chat about today was the new podcast series, The Woman in Maintenance, what this podcast is, and ultimately why you decided to start it.
Yeah, great question. So being involved with the maintenance community Slack group, I think was so wonderful in that we started to really hear from our industry what resources people were really hungry for and needed. And there are an incredible amount of resources out there for women in maintenance. And there are an incredible amount of women in our space ready to tell their stories. And so, the demand for, we need more spaces where there's cross collaboration, where more stories can be told and we can get the word out about how to empower women in this industry and therefore empower the workforce as a whole. That was just a theme we heard over and over again. And so being a woman in maintenance and seeing the power of this podcast and the other podcasts in the industry, we really wanted to help become part of that ecosystem and spread the word and amplify as much as we can. So that was kind of the impetus for the Women in Maintenance podcast. And I feel very fortunate that the podcasts I've been a guest on that focus on women in maintenance, all of those hosts, so Sonia, Charlie, they've all come on to our podcast now to share their stories and are sending other women in maintenance our way to keep amplifying the message. So we're all really working together as one grand network of empowering women podcasts. And I'm so grateful for that.
That's absolutely awesome. And I was talking to Charlie the other day, and we were kind of talking about women in maintenance, almost some of the diversity stats of women in our industry. It's 5.2% of all industrial maintenance technicians are women. So that basically means that 1 out of every 20 people. It still seems like a small number, but given there's millions of technicians all across the world, like there is a group of women within our industry. It's not big relative to the grand scheme of things, but there is this group of women within our industry that this podcast was centered around.
That's right.
One, build a community of women within our industry, because my guess is it could feel very isolating when there's 19 men around you. What I heard from you too is that you want to help promote women going into this industry.
Absolutely. So it's such a good point to make about, let's say 1 in 20 in a room, because no matter how much people are wonderful allies and accepting of you and promoting you, there is something about being an only or a first, right? And so what we try to do is kind of make the room bigger, right? So with for instance, the community Slack group, you now have more people in the room so that you can seek out others that have similar experiences as you, similar identities, and it just expands the pool of perspectives so that you can find connections with others that maybe perhaps before the digital era you would never have been able to do. And I think that only is going to increase our likelihood of not just increasing the number of women in maintenance in the future, but people in maintenance. We talk a lot about the skills gap and the impending need for more and more young people to see themselves in this industry and the challenges that they could take on, and the kinds of different individuals that come into our space. And so by promoting diversity and showing all the different kinds of individuals who work in our space, it can only benefit us. So you're absolutely right that this was first intended to make sure that that group of women in maintenance that may not have other connections or see themselves represented, firstly, see that representation and support them now, with the long-term goal that it's only going to help us in the future.
I think all of this centers around, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, basically every single organization right now. Why is DEI important to maintenance organizations? Why does it matter? Why is it absolutely critical?
I think we're very lucky because DEI is a conversation a lot of organizations are having. It's too hard to connect the dots for people to understand that having more perspectives in a room and more kinds of people represented can only benefit organizations. So I feel really lucky that these conversations exist and that a lot of people are able to draw those connections. And to your point, it's so critical that sometimes people are a little intimidated to have the conversations, right? It is a big topic. People understand at a general sense that diversity, equity, inclusion, they're all positive things that we want to make progress on. And from there is when the conversation gets complicated about how, about what we could be doing, whose responsibility is it, at what pace. And I think those are the hard conversations that we're starting to have and are really important because they do differ sometimes per organization. It depends on where you are in your diversity, equity, inclusion work, what your goals are and what resources you have towards it. But I think that understanding that having different perspectives in a room, having an openness to all people who are passionate for your cause and going to work very hard for your organization and making sure they're welcome and can do their best lives work is something that is true across all industries. And I feel very privileged that more and more organizations are seeing that benefit and now asking the hard questions of, okay, how?
The central part of like DEI is essentially having diverse thoughts, perspectives will lead to better decisions. And I actually think we've seen a huge component of that within the maintenance community. I think a big part of our maintenance community, the reason why it really took off is because we started bringing in people from different industries, people from different countries, people from different parts of the entire world, all under one digital umbrella. And through
Yeah.
this like community, people are able to learn from one another. I saw some awesome things within our community. And I think that's just a great example of how important DEI is and what it can do to an industry to propel it forward. You know, people in the aerospace industry had some best practices that they would share with others in manufacturing. And generally, before this, you kind of only learn from the people within your organization. You only learn from the person who taught you, who was there 20 years before you. And now with this information overload from different countries, different industries, like you get to learn from the best of the best, from people who approach the same problem very, very differently. And you trade ideas and you take some, you don't take others. That is one of the best examples of just how like diversity does drive better decisions.
Absolutely. And I would say even let's take 4 years ago with LinkedIn being the number one place where people could go and learn. You know, usually it was LinkedIn and you find an answer from an expert. But now with the maintenance community, you don't ask a question in order to get the answer. You ask a question to get many answers. You know, you're going to, in that thread of that question, you're going to hear lots of different arguments for different ways to do it and what that outcome was for that person. And it helps you have a much better sense of what's the right answer for you and your organization, which I think is just, as you said, a testament to the importance of having different voices and perspectives and something very special about the maintenance community.
Absolutely. All right. So obviously you kicked off this new podcast series. So talk, you know, a little bit about diversity within our space, but then, you know, focus it on the women leaders within our industry. I want to ask you, Caitlyn, what are you most excited about, you know, as you host this new podcast series, The Women in Maintenance?
Something I'm really excited to do with the Women in Maintenance podcast is show women in our industry all the different ways that they can be part of change and helping our industry move forward. And what I mean by that is trying to share stories of women, yes, who've created their own podcasts, who've been trailblazers and pioneer new programs and mentor, but also women who've decided, you know, I am not ready to be a public figure or to take on the responsibility of speaking for women in the industry. I just want to do really, really well in my job. And to be able to promote those women's stories and say, this is also important. And as someone looking to come into maintenance, you do not need to also take on the expectation that you're going to represent all of us and you need to go to conferences. There are ways to make change and lead however you feel comfortable. And so my goal is to really amplify voices of women at all levels of comfort in representing women and promoting change. And so if there is a woman in our industry who just goes in day out and helps her organization and makes it better, I want to tell that story as much as the trailblazers as well. So I'm excited to be able to get to talk to those women and hear all their stories.
I'm looking forward to hearing this podcast too, Caitlyn. So at the very end of our show, we do a quick fire set of questions. Basically, I ask a short question and you respond in 20 seconds or less. You ready for this, Caitlyn?
I'm so nervous, but I'm ready.
All right. Question number one, Caitlyn, what is a technology that you're most excited about that you think will leave a lasting impact on the entire industry?
It sounds like I'm self-promoting for us, but honestly, I think Slack in the maintenance community, being on Slack is super huge. I think being able to have answers from all over different time zones in one place, have direct connection to others is going to be a game changer for knowledge sharing across our industries.
Absolutely. I mean, we're already starting to see it. It's so cool being a part of this community. And again, getting diverse thoughts, diverse opinions from so many different people all around the world. Question number two, what's your favorite memory of the biggest win you've had within the maintenance reliability space?
I would have to say last year for the holidays in 2020, in the midst of the pandemic and lockdown, we hosted a holiday carnival for maintenance team members, but also their families. And I think that was a huge win for me. I was so nervous that people would be like, I do not want to go onto another Zoom meeting and do a holiday carnival, but people loved it. And people loved the ability to connect with fellow maintenance members in the industry on not a work specific topic, but in just getting to know each other and connect on the fact that we have families. This is a holiday season. And so I thought that was so special. It's a little different than, work conferences or industry conferences where people are coming together for that reason. To have maintenance people come together to connect on other identities beyond that was really special and such a win.
Yeah, that was one of the funnest events
Yes.
that we've done before. All right. Biggest mistake you've learned from, within the industry?
I would say I thought that getting my CMRP meant that I knew everything, or like I was an expert now and I'm good to go. And it was very humbling when we started the maintenance community Slack group, because the questions that were being asked, I realized that being trained to pass the exam and have that knowledge is very different than hands-on experience, or again, all the different perspectives people have. So it was a huge mistake for me to kind of get ahead of myself and think, yes, I did it. I'm ready to share my knowledge. I needed to step back and say, yes, I'm ready to keep learning.
I feel the same way every single day, where I think I know everything, but I'm nowhere even close. And
That's
I'm
right.
just learning so much from everyone around me, and yourself included, Caitlyn. Where do you go for educational content? Where do you go to continue learning and honing your skills?
Yeah, I've been on a really big book kick lately. So I try in the maintenance community or on LinkedIn, I ask for book recommendations or from my peers, just saying what were books that made a very lasting impression on you. And then I just make a little library for myself. So before bed, I try to read 1 to 2 chapters. Right now, not necessarily maintenance related, but I'm reading The Great CEO Within per Ryan's recommendation. So I try and have a diverse set of leadership books, but also maintenance and reliability books, and just kind of read small bites as I can.
All right. All right. Thank you so much for going through all of those quick fire set of questions with me. Lastly, Caitlyn, can you share with all of our listeners the different ways that they can connect with you and follow you on your journey?
Absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn under Caitlyn Young-Gilbert, or you can directly connect with me in the maintenance community Slack group over at upkeep.org. My handle is Caitlyn Young-Gilbert. Send me a Slack and I'd be happy to chat some more.
All right. And then obviously sign up for your podcast on a weekly basis.
Yes, thank you. I'm still new to promoting the podcast. That's right. Listen to the Women in Maintenance podcast.
That's right. That's right. Thank you so much, Caitlyn, for joining us. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in to this week's episode of the Maintenance Mavericks podcast. My name is Ryan. I'm the CEO and founder of UpKeep. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm super active. You can also, as Caitlyn mentioned, find me and Caitlyn in the maintenance community Slack group. You can feel free to follow up with any questions from today's episode or also suggest future topics. You can sign up at upkeep.org. I hope to connect with everyone soon. Until next time, thank you again, Caitlyn, for joining.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, everyone.